What is up, you guys? So today is another edition, another episode of Sound Design Wednesday. So today I'm going to talk to you guys all about Spire. I made this little free bank for it, 32 presets. It's on my Facebook page if you want to get that. And it's also going to be on Evolution of Sound's Facebook page, so check that out as well. That's a collaboration between me and Zen's World. And if you don't know Zen's World, he's like another YouTuber just like me. And so you should check him out and all his stuff. Anyway, him and me made a Spire preset bank, 64 presets, 32 of mine, 32 of his. So you can get mine 32 for now on my Facebook page, but later on Evolution of Sound, that's where you'll get the whole 64 preset bank. So be sure to check that out when that comes out, and it's for free. So isn't that sweet? So let's just get straight into it, because there's kind of a lot of stuff that I want to get to. So this is Spire, and it's one of my favorite synths. As you guys know, I'm a huge, massive, and silent guy. I do plenty of tutorials on that stuff because I know everyone has that. But now, as of recently, I've started to want to show some of the newer synths I've been using for a while too. It's kind of my way of trying to get everyone on YouTube to move on to newer and more different synths. I don't want to say more powerful synths, because I believe Silent and Massive and the stuff that's everyone has is powerful too. But anyway, this is Spire, and it's really awesome. So just a quick breakdown, just to I always like to break down the look of it so people can get past the intimidation of looking at a new synth. So if you just look at it like this: oscillator section, filter section, effects section, master and EQ section, modulation section, so Lfos and envelopes and steppers, and ARP, so we have an ARP here as well, and the matrix. So the matrix is the way we route things from the modulation section, or route things around. So the matrix is kind of a great way to, if I want to take a LFO and route it to all the oscillator pitches, I can also route it from here. But if I run out of slots here to modulate parameters with the LFO, I can always go in here, go to LFO 1, then go oscillator pitch 1, oscillator pitch 2, oscillator pitch 3, so on and so forth. Adjust the amount. So this is the positive amount, so this side, and this is the negative side right here. So this brings it downward, and this brings it upward. So you get the idea. So if I wanted to take an LFO to affect all the pitches, this is how I would do it. And you can route all sorts of things. So there's 15 slots in the matrix. So page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 pages of matrix, 15 slots. Each slot you can have 2 sources, so I can have an LFO and an envelope on to modulate these parameters, and you have 4 triggers in each of these. So you can do the math there, and it's quite a lot of modulation you can have going on. I feel like the A.N.A and Silent are really good synths, but I feel like they fall short by not having a really good matrix, and this is a really powerful synth just like those, and way different way on its own. But the matrix here is definitely very capable of a lot of things. And so we'll just take a quick look at things. So we can even affect the slot amounts. So if we look at slot amount, slot 1, amount 1, which is basically this, we can even modulate those with other things. And we have master section for the EQ and the multiband compressor there, and things like that. And then some of the effects, the LFOs and envelopes are here as well in the filter section. And then the oscillator has its own set of parameters that we can play around with, and then the oscillator is amps. So pretty much a lot of stuff, and then the ARP as well. So it's pretty cool. And this has 4 envelopes, 4 LFOs, 2 steppers, and an ARP. So envelope 1 is your main envelope. That's your synth. That's the amp envelope. So it controls the amplitude of Spire. So this is the amp envelope basically. So, or in Massive that would be envelope 4. So this is the main envelope. So if I want to make this patch, even though it's a pluck, last a little longer, I could just have it like this. which I won't say because this is a pluck preset that I made, so I don't want to change that up. And so then we have the ARP. So the ARP is basically just like any other ARP. We turn it on, we have gates, we have some times we can play with, so you can see quite a bit of that. Some swings, some of the modes, so it's kind of just like a basic ARP. And then we have, other than those kind of things, we have the Lfos, and they look like this. We have the other envelopes. We have a stepper. So the stepper here isn't as crazy as the one in Massive, where you can load in all sorts of curves, but this one is pretty capable of a lot of things. So you can kind of go in here and draw, you can kind of morph your own wave a little bit. I think there are better ways to do this. I fully don't know how to manipulate this, all crazy like, but let me see. The other day I made a really interesting looking shape here. Anyway, so you can also press X2 to double that up, or X4 to 3, and then you can copy and paste it in all around here. So copy. I copy this, click on this box, paste it in. You could reverse it and do a hold, so you get the pulse wave, and you can kind of also double that up and move this around and really fool around with this stuff. So inside of here you have some capabilities, and let me see if I can now move that around. Nope. Anyway, so you get the idea. This is the whole modulation section. So we have the LFOs, the envelopes, and the basic ARP, and the envelopes are pretty interesting because it's more than just ADSR. It's also giving you a little bit of more sustain controls, so that's kind of cool too. So you can you can go a little crazy with your sustain and make your sustain ring out a little longer instead of having to just throw up that release right away. So it gives you a little bit more flexibility. Honestly, I'm probably gonna just not use it too much because I can't really hear those kind of things, like those little extra sustains. But also, if you double click on the in between some of these little parameters here, you can see that we have different curves. So we can have like a linear type of slope here, or we can have like a little curve there. So kind of those kind of things, like it's more logarithmic instead of just linear. So that's pretty cool too. And then we have this, I'm just talking about all the things quickly that I think I should bring up. So this is a multiband compressor here. So this is kind of cool to bring up a little bit. So it's kind of interesting why they added this in. I mean, to have a multiband compressor just there, but I kind of like it too. And then we have overall boost. So if your patch is a little quiet and you don't want to drag up the main volume, which is this one right here, you can just add some boost and makes the whole thing louder. And then you have soft and clear. So if you click on this, it softens and clears up the sound a little bit. And this is warm, so it adds warm characteristics. And then you have a 3-band EQ and things like that. The effects is honestly, you have a lot of interesting choices. So you have everything from tube to like distortion types to phaser, and you even have a vowel mode here, so you have some vowels to play with here. You have chorus, delay. The delays I particularly like on this. Most synth delays are kind of meh, but this one's alright. This one is much better than most others. And then you have a reverb, and you have 2 modes for this, so plate 1, plate 2. So I think it's interesting that they went with plate modes, which is kind of cool. You can sync the pre-delay, all sorts of cool stuff. And then, the filter section is pretty interesting as well. So anyway, let's just get into it. So I'm going to just show you kind of how to make something like, I guess a bass would be the most basic thing I could show. And then I'll get into leads some other day, and pads and risers and plucks and arps and those kind of things. But I do want to show you off a little bit of this stuff, so you guys can get an idea of what you can do with this. Let me add some volume to this. So that's just a basic arp. And then we have some plucks. And then we have, you know, some risers. And then we have, you know, pads, so, you know, it's really nice to play some nice long chords on these, so. And then we have some like leads. I like to have a little bit of, on some of them they're also polyphonic, so you can kind of also play some nice chords on these as opposed to just one like one finger leads, which just means you're just playing one note and kind of making a little melody. So you can kind of use these leads for all sorts of purposes as well. So you get the idea. So now let's just make something really quick just to wrap up the video. So I'm just gonna go into initiated preset. And by the way, it's really easy to make your own banks in here. And what I like is if I open Spire in another DAW, for some reason my banks are still loaded into this into the program. So you can remove them and you know, save your banks and blah blah blah. So, you know, electric voltage state volume 1 by K-Say, that's me. This is my bank pretty much. So you know, we'll just go to a new. I'm already gonna start working on electric voltage state 2. So that one, you know, that one is the next one I'm working on. It took me a couple of days to, maybe like 2 or 3 days to make all these. So, you know, just to get a feel of the synth. So it was really fun. So let's just, again, sorry to keep detracting myself. Let's just get into this. So here's where our amp volumes are. So we're just gonna start off with oscillator 1, and you can even mute these if you want, so you can kind of focus up even after you have all these oscillators going on. So I kind of like that. I've been using that a lot. So I'm just gonna play like an A1. So that's the note I'm gonna kind of base this what octave I'm gonna stay in for this sound. So you know, we have some very typical classic wavetable type stuff. So these are some of our waveforms here, and it's interesting because you start off with a saw wave in classic, and you can kind of turn this into a square wave. So, and Control B is kind of how we can kind of turn this and move this around. It's not really phase, it's just sort of the wave offset, I suppose you could say. And then we can mix back in, you know, another wavetable position or another waveform, and then use the wavetable to mix it in. So, you know, kind of cool stuff there. And then we can adjust the phase, and I like that you can kind of see the phase line. So if I kind of want to start off in a point like this, make it like a Q pulse, kind of like, or H pulse in Silent, even though that's a square wave. You know, that's what it looks like. So I'm not going to use this. And also you have octave and notes and fine tuning and all that stuff. So and then we have the noise oscillator, so the noise generator. So there's a very interesting thing about this noise oscillator. This actually shapes itself from whatever you have inside the waveform, whatever waveform you've chosen. So it actually shapes itself differently. So it's pretty interesting that. And you can do those kind of things. So you can kind of mix it in a bit. And then you have if you stay to the left side, you have a low pass. And if you stay to the right side, you have a high pass filter. And then this is your reso. So that is also interesting as well. Then we have an FM oscillator. So it's really interesting how we can have FM synthesis along with our typical wavetable type synthesis, and then have, you know, AM sync and sawtooth pulse with modulation. So we have quite a few cool options, and I've been really liking the AM sync. So if you kind of bring down the time on that, you get really interesting stuff. now I can mix in a little bit of a sine wave, or I can try other ones. So I like that if you hold down, you can kind of browse through the waveforms. And this kind of reminds me of Cyclops a little bit with some of the synthesis in there. So let's say, for example, I wanted to throw an LFO onto Control B of Oscillator 1. So I would just go Oscillator 1, Control B, add the amount upward, and let's see, let's kind of sync this. So if it's on sync, the rate's going to be to this time, and if the sync is off, it's in free time, so you can kind of just adjust it to no particular exact time, but kind of its own hertz kind of rate sort of thing. So I'm just gonna put this on 1/16, drag this up, let's put this on a triangle so we can get a saw wave out of this, since it's the closest thing. Now we can mess with the form, throw the phase right here, so it starts there. So if you look at the shape of this, it's basically a saw wave. So that's kind of my way of making a ghetto one of these. And then we have amp, which is kind of, you can think of it as the depth of which it modulates this. So let's just listen to this. So kind of wanted to get it to sound like this a bit. And let's do something kind of interesting. Let's add that same parameter again, but going now this way and incorporate quite a bit of velocity there. We don't want it to cancel it out, so maybe the other way. And I like this, that you can just copy this LFO, paste it over here, and now we can kind of change the rate, maybe do other settings with this. And maybe, again, don't want to cancel out the other LFO. Maybe go back to this one, turn this off. Alright, so let's turn this down an octave. So this is already the first oscillator of my new patch here, so I just decided I'm going to make a new patch. I'm going to turn off boost and warm. Usually I made my own initialized preset. This isn't one of them, but if you click on any of the bass, lead, pad, riser, plux, or arps, any of these title, like anything that's just a title and not a preset, those are my own initiated presets. So it's basically where I went in and went through all the parameters and initiated it in a way that I prefer. Because even though I always tell people click on the initialize your synth thing, I always prefer to kind of make my own as well, just so that I can get to work faster. Because sometimes you'll see that if you initialize it, boost and warm and other tiny little things will be on, and I like to just have everything off except one oscillator. So I just do that for myself, for just to get straight into sound design. Anyway, so let's just let's go our first envelope, since this is our main envelope here. So I'm gonna bring down the curve like this, bring the attack all the way down, a tiny amount of release, a tiny amount of these sustain controls here. I'm going drift is interesting. Drift it randomizes a small portion of the pitch, so it kind of increases it positive upward by like 3 something. I can't remember, but it randomizes the pitch, not in a crazy way. It's just sort of as you're playing along, it kind of just does these little characteristic type things. So I kind of like this, so I'm going to leave that on. I'm going to turn my bend range positive 12, negative 12, 12 to 12. Turn on a little bit of glide here. And since this is now a bass, let's just go to mono 2. So I'll explain. I did a tutorial for Zen's World's YouTube page that will kind of explain some of this stuff, so I'm not going to go too much into basics, but if not, read the manual quickly. I'll just explain it quickly. So the polyphonic modes here are 1 and 2. those are the only ones that matter with the voicing. All these mono ones don't matter with how many voices you have there. So basically mono just means you can only play one note at a time, so it's perfect for bass stuff. And mono 1 is more portamento based. Mono 2 is more legato based. I mean, it's basically mono legato, and this one is just mono. And it kind of glides to the other notes according to whatever you have here in portamento, whereas the legato one kind of glides on its own. And 3 and 4 are kind of the same, so mono 3 is again portamento bass, but the difference between mono 3 and 1 is that 3 has an interesting way of re-triggering itself when you're playing two notes. Even though you only hear one note, as it glides to the other, that's kind of when it chooses to re-trigger when you release the first note, I believe. And 4 is the same way with the release and the re-trigger, with two notes played at the same time. And this one is legato based. And Polyphonic 1 is portamento based, and Polyphonic 2 is legato based. So those are kind of the things that matter there. So we're just gonna put this on mono 2. Let's add some volume to this, and let's copy this oscillator. Or no, let's just throw in a FM now. So what I like about the FM is without even having to mix in the waveform, I can affect the kind of FM waveform that I'll start with. So if I start with, let's see, vocal 1, and I'm gonna mute oscillator 1 real quick. And for this parameter to work right here, we have to introduce a little bit of wave table position here. So we're just gonna make it a little brighter. So I'm gonna want to modulate this. So let me go back into over here. Let me make sure that I bring up my decay. Make these lines more linear on the decay and the sustains. So something like that. And let's go back to this. So we've already used the parameters here. Actually, no, I have a free slot here. So I'm gonna go to oscillator 2, Control A, and so here I have FM synthesis, here I have AM sync type of synthesis, and so it's kind of interesting how those two combine. So and I haven't even gone into some of the other things on oscillator 1, so I'll go back now to that, and let's kind of add some more voices to this. So we're gonna want to add some more voices so we can detune it, because you need more than one voice to have noticeable detuning. Otherwise you're just actually detuning the one synth. So we're gonna just add up to 3 here. You can go up to 9. I'm just gonna start small. And I like to think of density as depth of detune. It's obviously density, but I think of it as, how much you can how much the detune goes into the oscillator a bit. That's kind of how I like to think of it. So I like to kind of start small again here. And this is a much deeper detunage, but it kind of flows better. So, and then we have some unison stuff here. So, you can have that unison be applied over 2 octaves or 3 octaves or in chords and blah, blah, blah. So it's kind of interesting. I'm not going to fool around with that since it's kind of a bass type thing that I'm starting. So now we also have some width and such. I'm going to leave it straight down, but I'm going to bring it up so you guys can kind of hear what it does. So it just makes it much wider, obviously. And you notice how the mid clears out, so it's a really good width too. It's not like a messy one that leaves a lot of mid still. Like, and by what I mean by mid, like it leaves a lot of the signal still in the middle. some with knobs and parameters, and other synths still leave a very full mid and add sides to it, where this kind of pushes it more to the sides away from the mid. So I kind of like that. So and then we have the A.N.A, which is kind of the retrig of this synth. So if we have this on, when we play a new note, it will retrigger. So that's kind of interesting. And then we have the invert and key track. So this, depending on what note you play on your keyboard, the pitch will follow that. If we don't have this on, then obviously we can't assign any, we can't change the pitches as we play it. And then we have pan and the filter input. So this is on filter 1 right now. This would be routed to filter 2, filter 1, and in between is routed perfectly between filter 1 and 2. So very basic stuff there as well. And let's go to oscillator 2 now. I want to lessen a little bit of that Lfos on the first oscillator. Or maybe just have it off. Now I'm going to want to fill in the spaces in between, these two waves, these two oscillators. So, there's a lot of like bright stuff going on in here. So maybe I'm going to add in another FM, just leave it on sine and bring this up a bit. So now we're kind of filling in the bass part of it. Especially if we bring that down an octave. Maybe increase the voice to 2. Usually with sine waves, they leave it on 1 voice. Yeah, there's really no point on adding more and detuning to that. It's a sine wave, so we're going to leave it there. And we're going to make sure the retrig is on for all of these and the key and all that. And this is routed to filter 1. Let's put it to filter 2. And in between filter 1 and 2, and same for the last oscillators. So the last oscillator, I'm going to add in a pulse wave. So we're going to leave this on classic, and we're going to bring this up to we're going to add in a pulse wave. And the reason why why I'm adding this in is from what I've realized over synthesis over the years is that when you add in a sine wave to fill in the bass parts of something, when you add a pulse wave on top of that, it kind of fills in the blanks in between. So it's kind of nice. It's a nice combination. So if I mute these two, we'll just hear the last two oscillators. See how it kind of fills it in? It's filling it in. And go back to envelope 1. that's kind of what I have going on. Just going to leave it on link so that cutoff 2 follows cutoff 1. I'm going to put the filter balance straight down the middle. So that way serial and parallel serial routing doesn't affect the outcome, because right now it's on serial, so that means it's going through filter 1, then through filter 2, and then it's being played. So if we put it on parallel and we set it all the way to 1, we're not going to hear anything. Or actually, because I've put all the filters to in between both. But if it was all the way on one, so if we mute all these and route this last oscillator to filter 1, and then put this on filter 2 and put it on parallel, we wouldn't hear it, because parallel now means that it's playing filter 1 and filter 2 at the same time. So if the filter balance is all the way over here, we're not going to hear this. Now if we switch this over to the other side, we'll hear it, because now we hear filter balance 2. Now if we play serial, we'll hear it go through filter 1, then filter 2, and we'll still hear that. So we're just going to set that in the middle, kind of put these all the way back. I'm going to leave it on serial so it goes through filter 1 and then out of 2. So I'm not going to have anything on filter 2, but it's okay. So we're just going to have it like this, and we're just going to add in a little bit of a high, let's throw in a high pass. So I'm putting it around, like 80, so kind of low. Add a little bit of key track. Now let's shape it a bit. So now I can go and add some tube 1. And I'm going to low cut it. So I like that this is here, because I like to low cut distortions, because nothing kills bass more than compression and distortion. Kind of breaks up the bass a bit. So if you can low cut distortion on bass, then it's going to stay rich while everything else gets distorted. So that's kind of the ideal idea for me when it comes to distortion on low end. So if we kind of A/B it from this to this, we have more bass, because we're low cutting the distortion, or the tube I should say, from adding in harmonics into the bass, making it higher and kind of overall killing it. So let's kind of, so that's kind of what I like there. We have the phaser and the vowel stuff. We're not going to do that. I'm not going to really add in delays or reverbs. It's a bass, so I think we're about done. And we can add in a little bit of this multiband compressor here. Maybe EQ, boost up the low end a little bit. Cut out a little bit of the mid with the notch. So not that much. Make this a little bit more narrow. Maybe boost a little bit of the high end. Very small stuff. And so that's basically it, just a basic, quickly made synth thing. And hopefully you guys like this. Like, subscribe, and all that stuff if you haven't. And I don't know what I'm going to do in next week's sound design video, so let me know what I should do. And if you guys want more Spire, more A.N.A tutorials, kind of newer synths that don't have a lot of tutorials on YouTube yet, let me know, because I'm going to start doing A.N.A Spire tutorials, since there's already a million massive and silent tutorials and everyone knows how to use that stuff. So I'm going to kind of start filling in the blanks of YouTube in terms of there not being any Spire and A.N.A tutorials, and maybe Morphix, but I don't think anyone has that. I think I'm the only one that has Morphix. So anyway, lates guys.